the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. Open the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
LaMarr Darnell Shields.
If you've ever wondered who's the woman behind the Mess in a Bottle brand, her name is Kalilah Wright, and her messages are here to inspire. Maybe you've seen Serena Williams rock her Queen Army fatigue as she prepared for Wimbledon, or Lovia Jai soliciting support on Instagram, or Lena White, my homegirl from Chicago, on the 2017 BET Awards red carpet, keep creating dope ass shit until someone notices this t-shirt. Kalilah is Jamaican born, grew up also in New York. At the tender age of 4, she moved to the US. She is the founder and CEO of expressive brand Mess in a Bottle, and is an accomplished designer and trained architect. She used her master's degree from the great Morgan State University, shout out to HBCUs in the building, and a bachelor's of arts from Penn State University to establish the brand in January 2016, Baltimore, Maryland. Wright started Mess in a Bottle in 2016, and a month later, homegirl quit her job from Under Armour, which is insane, especially being from Jamaica. I know her grandmama said, "You're crazy, got for leasing that good government job," even though Under Armour and government, that's a bad Jamaican accent. Maybe that was my Indian accent. She now has her own studio space with staff of 8 people, do all the order fulfillment, packaging, and screen printing. T-shirts are emblazoned with empowering messages such as "Be Great Today" and 100% black owned. All of Mess in a Bottle's t-shirt designs are packaged and delivered in a reusable bottle, which is right there, hence the name. The Mess in a Bottle brand was established to evoke change, question Kalilah's audience, and allow individuals wearing their message to be vocal without saying anything at all. Each item is designed and printed right here in the great city of Baltimore. Kalilah Wright's life story is seamlessly embedded into her brand, and the message on her shirt sums up her life's mantra perfectly. Just keep going, signed the universe. So I want to thank the universe, homegirl, for bringing you to the bomb shelter. Welcome to the bomb shelter. Look at that beautiful smile over there.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, I got to play her because she says she's Jamaican, but I don't know any Jamaicans that come into anybody's house bringing their own food.
So you're just going to tell the audience, you're going to put it out there already.
I got to put you out.
All right.
Because I listen.
I see how this is going to go.
I see you a yard girl. You didn't come in with any Jamaican cuisine. Your ancestors in Jamaica right now. First of all, in the name of Bob Marley, how could you not come in here and bring me some food? So, homegirl, I am so grateful. It has been a pleasure researching you.
Thank you.
Researching you, so I got to go back and talk about how we met. I was walking down the street at Artscape, probably one of the biggest outdoor art festivals in the country right now. And they had you in this little bogus corner, which they should not have.
Well, no, let me tell you the
story. Was that a good corner?
No, well, what happened is I had so many things going on, and every year before Artscape, I'm always really excited, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do Artscape. And you know, as the as the brand was developing, I was just like, all right, this year is gonna be the year. So of course, so many other events, and July just crept up on me, and literally the day before Artscape, I was like, is Artscape tomorrow? And I only knew because like streets started blocking off, and I was like, no, it's here. And I didn't even, figure out vending. So what I did was, in true Kalilah shoot your shot fashion, I I went up to Artscape and I just, looked around and I started seeing who might be there and if I knew anyone, and I didn't. But what I did do is I went into different booths and spaces, and I was just like, is there any way that I could vend in this little corner? And and I also brought my vending machine, and the thing was that I couldn't be outside and outdoors because of not showing and electricity and the weather not being sure, and it ended up raining, and it rained, and so thankfully. And I figured too, because of the rain, people would be going into like sheltered spaces, and so though it was
so smart. See, I was hating on Artscape. Black folks always got to make some racist right. We were racist for putting you in the corner. But
I went there, and it was a free space. And I'll put the plug out there. Shout out to BCAN, Baltimore Creatives. I was a part of a cohort recently, and the guy knew one of the people at BCAN. And he said, come on, your family. And he said, I'll make room. And that was my little spot. So I am grateful because I was not vending and I didn't pay for that space.
Oh, man, I'm loving that story. First of all, researching it, there were so many stories. So I must admit that vending machine caught my attention. I was out there on my e-bike. I got a new bike. And of course, you didn't get caught in the rain, but your boy over here got caught in the rain. But I was so glad I did walk down or ride down the street, and I saw this huge vending machine. And for those folks, and we're going to talk about how they can get in contact with you that don't know about your what you're doing. First of all, they must have been under a rock for them not to know it. But the vending machine was so dope. I was like, yo, I want to bring the vending machine here right here so I can show it to everybody. But it caught my attention. What was the idea, before we get into the whole branding piece, what was your whole idea behind the vending machine?
Surprisingly enough, when I first thought of the idea to launch Mess in a Bottle, the vending machine shortly came right after. I just thought about being an architect and being a designer. I thought about accessibility and having people be able to shop and have the accessibility of having the product at any given time. So the vending machine was something that I've been developing for probably almost a year and a half, 2 years. So to sort of see it into fruition and for it to be here now, even my friends, I sketched out a vending machine about 2 years ago, and I sent it to my personal friends, and I'm like, look, this is what I want to create. And so for them to see it, and for me to actually be traveling around the United States with this vending machine, they are super, it makes me proud. Okay, I actually did this thing that I set my mind to do.
So it's interesting. I think you and I talked about how in other countries, in particular, Asian countries, U.S., we behind on everything. Because when you go to Asia, in particular China,
vending machines
you can
everywhere.
you can get anything out of a vending machine. Was there an inspiration from that? Did you
definitely.
notice what was happening in other countries?
So I have not been to China yet, but I knew that was one of the things. And now that I decided to put apparel into the machine, I started to see them all over the airport. And not really, you don't have too many clothing. There's some brands like Uniqlo and other brands who do Levi's. They have a t-shirt, a undershirt type of, so a night out on town, and you're spending a night out. This is a good way to have a t-shirt.
Could you imagine that on a college campus? Many college campuses creeping yo, I need to change my clothes.
Right. Grab a tea real quick. Yeah.
Maybe
and
you can put some in the hood. So.
Yep. Gotta be careful with the machines, but somebody will sell the whole machine.
You are right. Yeah, like what we're seeing with these little scooters across the country right now.
Man,
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
So if I see a cat riding down the street on a scooter with your vending machine,
right, you'll know. You're gonna snatch it over from me.
I'm gonna snatch it. But you're so innovative. So how do you go from being an architect at Under Armour and then now creating an apparel e-commerce? Because I don't want to water it down. This is beyond a t-shirt company.
Thank you.
It's beyond a t-shirt. You look at the bottle. How do you go from being an architect to now designing an apparel or creating an apparel company?
Right. So it's funny because I think that this is the universe. It was already set up from the beginning. when I was doing architecture, I loved architecture, and I was doing retail architecture. So I was actually doing all the store planning, store design, things like that.
So I would walk into like because my buddy, I think he does something very similar. Like, so his client is like, I think Banana Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So Banana Republic would have these designs. You would go and sort of lay some of that stuff out.
No, not even. Like, so I worked on the architecture
the
side.
architecture
so
side.
like you would almost go into a mall or, you know, a store that would be an empty box. And the architects will put where the dressing rooms are, where the bathrooms are. Fixtures would be, what the wall units would look like.
So who were some of the stores you worked for? You remember?
So I've done a lot of Carhartt stores.
Okay.
I've done Louis Vuitton stores, Chanel stores. So I did
Oh, so
a
you
lot
like
of...
in the high, hold on, let's back
Yeah,
up.
well-
You like you didn't say like the dollar store or fancy.
No, because you know what? I've always had a love for fashion and retail architecture. So I've always been into very like high-end design. And growing up in New York, my mom, like we would go to like a Saks Fifth. And so those things, I wanted to, in high school, do something different. So I didn't want to do fashion because I felt like all the girls were interested in fashion.
Yeah, everybody like, I'm going to FIT.
Right. So for me, I really wanted to go into a field that was not fashion, but still allowed me to use my creativity and like my design skills. So that's where architecture came into play. And I was always doing architecture, but on a very high-end scale. So the Ralph Lauren stores, I worked for like lighting design firms, and the Ralph Lauren stores was one of our clients. So those kind of like retail architecture I love.
So you went from that to then creating an apparel company. How does that go? How does that relationship develop?
So I thought Under Armour was my dream job, and it probably was. It was like my dream career where I worked for a great company. It was a great atmosphere there. It was just a great fit for me to really see the structure of businesses, and creativity was like written on the wall all over. And again, I think that's the universe, because even being in such a creative space, every day when I went to work, I just had ideas of creating my own. And I would probably, I would do my work, but then I would go up to one of my coworkers and be like, I think I got it. I have a new idea. And this company was birthed at Under Armour. So I first started, I was an entrepreneur, and I guess I didn't know I was this much of an entrepreneur. I thought I was just like doing little side things, and I loved it. So I had a baby furniture company first called Lily Nash. And that was my way of really like expressing my creativity outside of like the architecture world.
So you
I would
created
do
another company?
This was my first.
Who's Lily Nash?
So Lily Nash was like a furniture company where it was baby furniture, and I would always create like baby items for my friends. And I would give them these personalized like rocking chairs and really cute furniture pieces. So I would dumpster dive and go to like Craigslist and buy furniture and then repurpose it. The thing was, it was a lot of labor. And I was just like, okay, I love doing this, but let me try to draw on onesies. So I started doing apparel that way. And people loved, like adults started saying, I want the t-shirts. And so once that happened, and they were moving really fast.
It was cheaper than
it was
furniture.
cheaper, and it was going so fast. Like I couldn't keep up when it came to the apparel. So I was like, you know what? I think I might have something. I'll stick with apparel. And kids, it was fun, but there's so many sizes with kids. So one day I was at work. I was going through a divorce. I had a 2-year-old at home. And it was
I think I met him at the art show.
He's 5 now. And it was during the Freddie Gray riots, and the city was just like really in an uproar. And being on Under Armour's campus, there was so many people afraid to talk about what was going on in the city. And I lived in that area. I was only 2 blocks from the CBS that got burned down. So for me, also being a little bit of an outsider, not growing up in Baltimore, but Baltimore became home. So it felt a little bit like going to Under Armour's campus and having people not really want to touch the issue of Freddie Gray because it was race related. I felt stifled at work. Like I wasn't able to express myself and say how I really felt. So that's when I started creating and writing messages and putting words of how I felt onto t-shirts. And as I did that, I was just like, okay, well, I don't know what this thing is. And it was under Lily Nash, but it really wasn't, because it was no longer baby stuff. And one day I was sitting at my desk at Under Armour, and I remember the day because I even still have the sketch of me drawing it in my notebook. But I looked down at the screen because I had my headphones on. It was like it was in the riot time. And I would look down at my screen because I was like, oh, this song is really nice. And I looked down, and it was a message in a bottle on the screen.
Wow.
And it was
like a screen.
It was an album. Chance the Rapper has an album called Surf.
Yes.
And it was and I've never heard the album, never heard the song, like none of that. And it was that album. And when I looked down, it was a message in a bottle on the screen. And I was like, that's it. It's a message in a bottle. And then of course I looked it up, and message in a bottle is like taken. So I was like, so it's a mess. And I was like, I'm a mess. Life's a mess. The world's a mess. And I was like, it's a mess in a bottle.
Wow. Heck of a story. So who were some of your first clients? Was it the Under Armour staff? Did you give them shirts?
So,
what did you do with the shirts?
I'll say.
Because most people, I'm sure, I don't know if you're familiar with the 5-second rule. There's a great story about 5 seconds, and I'm glad that you sort of took it, because those ideas are constantly moving, and the fact that you acted on it. This research says we have 5 seconds, because our mind is a deletion device. And I always tell people, whoever created this thing, whatever we call it, was amazing. Because could you imagine keeping all this stuff in your head? It's like a deletion device, so things sort of fall off. So within 5 seconds, you had a quick window, and you wrote it down, and then the spirit, whatever you call that spirit is, all of a sudden Chance the Rapper comes up, and there's your message. So then how did you get the message out there? Did you start with the people at Under Armour? Did you just
Well, I didn't start with the people at Under Armour because I wasn't ready to be fired, and but I started with the people. So I already had built this like client base by having the baby furniture. So I really started with social media, and I would say my friends and family, I can't take it from them. They have like my Facebook family, because that's really what they are, and Instagram, like they were the ones, they would buy the messages. Like I had a friend yesterday, she has a very small podcast, my friend Dr. Tammy, she came to my studio yesterday to interview me, and she had a shirt I made about 4 years ago, and she was like,
she was rocking the shirt.
She was rocking the shirt.
You know, I was kind of mad at having. So
I know. I was just thinking about that.
I told the producer,
I got you. You should, and I got you.
But I appreciate it.
Yes, I got you. But she wore a shirt, and it meant so much to me because it was such an old shirt, and it was when I was experimenting, when I knew nothing about vinyl and how to cut and what to do, and like the colors were like 3 different colors. They were incorrect, and I looked at it now like I would never make that a day of my life.
That's a vintage shirt though.
Yeah, like the font was like 3 different types, and I was like, oh my gosh. But so they were the ones who have truly supported and poured into my business, bought more.
What type of feeling does that give to you? Because I just received a text message from a good friend of mine who's a speaker like me, and she talked about not getting that support, sometimes that support at home. What does that do for you as an entrepreneur, or as just a woman, period, when you're seeing people pouring out that know?
Well, it's amazing, and it's admirable, and I'm very humbled, like too humbled, in the sense of I don't even receive it in the way that I probably should, because it's just like, I think I'm still in shock that this thing has blown up and that I'm touching people all over the world. We have customers even in Fiji that are buying my messages. I think this weekend I did an event at a festival called Envision Fest in New York, and a woman, like, she knew nothing about my brand, and the jacket that you speak of that Serena Williams wore, the Queen Don't Be Afraid to Rule Like a King, she was super excited. She was like, I don't know who you are, what this brand is, but I need that message. And she was like, that message is for me. You created that for me. And she was just like, literally, like, she's like, I have goosebumps. Like, I needed to know that I could like rule, and that I could put my foot down, and that I can be present. And, and it was just like, wow, thank you. And it's been amazing to know that I can touch people with a message. I think it's been very gratifying to know that I've created something that does that and does that effect.
So I want to read something to you. So Tony Robbins has said that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask. I couldn't agree more. What are some preliminary questions that you typically ask of yourself when you're designing a product, either for yourself or for a client? What are those questions that you typically ask yourself?
Sometimes I ask myself is if it's too much, and if it's too, not that anything, I touch on race, I touch on politics, I touch on, I go there, but I also try to go there creatively. So, sometimes, and I try not to just state the obvious. So sometimes I try to look at that less is more type of technique, and it brings me back to architecture and a lot of things that I learned in architecture. Like, you don't need an elaborate building or design to create a masterpiece. So I think that I'm always kind of just trying to do more of a minimalist approach and just making sure like my designs and the fonts that I choose are clean, that the message is clear, that it's not confusing, and that people will grab it right away, that it's something that, and so for me, if it makes me laugh, if it evokes emotion, I'm like, oh shit, you got a good one. Yeah,
So walk our listeners through the process of designing a shirt. So not too long ago in Starbucks, there was a situation where two African American males were asked to be escorted off the premises because they didn't buy anything. And so I read that you created a coffee mug that says, "I like my coffee black and without prejudice." Walk us through that process of designing that from what comes into your head or to your heart to then on. Walk us literally through that. What does that look like?
So, what happens first is I look at the controversy, and it doesn't have to be like something that is super hot that everyone's talking about. Most of the times I try to connect with the things that are close to me, or that's close to the people around me. So if it's something going on with transgender, or if it's something that's going on with race, and if it's, something going on with immigration, like those are things that like tug really hard at me, because I'm like, the people around me are feeling, they're hurting, they want their message to be told, and they may not know what the right way is to say that. So once I pick the topic or the thing that I'll be addressing, I then try to figure out what am I going to put it on? Is it going to be a t-shirt? Is it going to be a sweatshirt? Is it going to, so I figure, is it going to be a mug? And then from that, I just start to think of like phrases. Like it usually comes to me in seconds, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I usually have the phrase, and then maybe in less than a minute, it just takes me a second to like take out a word, put in another word, and then I go on to design it. So that's when I knew that like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because like it takes me no time to come up with a phrase, to come up with like a worded message that I could put on a t-shirt, a mug, or something. So I'll think about what the message is, and I have maybe 1 or 2 great friends that I like call, and if they chuckle or if they say nah, try again, then I go back to the drawing board. But for the most part, I trust my instincts, and I'll say, all right, I think this is a good one, and I'll put it up. So I put it in Photoshop, design it, mock it up, and I put the item, like a photorealistic version of it, up. And then if it bites, like social media will go crazy. They'll say, I want one. Is it on a site already? And so that's what will already make me want to then put it into production mode.
So what type of feeling do you want people to have once they purchase or wearing one of your products?
Pride.
Pride.
No matter what, like no matter if it's a tough, because we're there to start conversations. So, no matter if it's a funny message, no matter if it's political, no matter if it's a life message, no matter if it's a career message and something that you're wearing to work just for, to make a statement. I want people to feel proud of whatever their message is. And, that's the reaction I've been getting.
So, of course, doing my research on you, I joked to you about the Jamaican Roots. So what has your Jamaican roots taught you about being an entrepreneur?
It's funny because I wasn't sure where this came from. Both my mom and my dad, they work, they're a 9-to-5 type of, and that's what was trained and taught to be a 9-to-5 worker. But my great grandmother, like I remember her going to work and working for a hotel and walking down the street, towards the beach in Jamaica. And she I think that pride of still her working for someone, but the sense of taking care of, this family that she worked for, still gave her somewhat of an independence. Like, she was a big part of making sure that she, kept them together. So I think, like, just me remembering her walking to work and just that passion, she was very invested in taking care, like that was her job. And so I think that now has transformed me into really feeling like I want ownership. And I think, both my parents coming from Jamaica as immigrants to the United States, it just made me, I feel like they sacrificed so much now for me to now be able to, I have both my parents, they have high school diplomas. So for me to have a master's in architecture and start my own business, and, I think that they did that for me along with my grandmother and my aunt. Like, those are, like, I look at that as their sacrifices are now my successes.
Who's your favorite Jamaican artist?
I mean, we all love Bob Marley, of course.
Give me somebody besides Bob.
I know, I was gonna say right now, I like, there's an artist called Conscience. He has really great music. I'm a fan of Lady Spice. She's controversial right now. And I'm a big fan of, like, Lady Saw. I like old school and popcorn.
So, who I'm a big fan of? He's in jail. I think he's on his way out. Buju Banton.
Oh, of course, Buju.
I
love, yes.
He has this, I love.
Great artist. I grew up on, Music Sanchez, Barrington Levy, things like that. Because my dad and my grandfather, like, they all used to have records. And, like, my dad, he's always lived in Washington, D.C. So coming down from New York to D.C. to visit, he would always play, like, very old school reggae music. So it's dear to me.
So you got the struggle in your blood. It's in your heart. So I'm assuming that the shirts and the designs is a part of that struggle.
It is.
What's deep in your roots. Because I've been to Jamaica on several occasions, so you can feel, you can feel that strong African presence. And you can feel from the Maroons fighting, from, of course, the great folks who come through Jamaica. But I sort of see this as that, as that type of protest, handing out those shirts with those, because words are so powerful. We're going to talk about some of your favorite words later on, but words are really, really powerful. Let's talk about Setbacks. Because you were part of an armed robbery, and so business went under, then you had to start all over. Let's talk about Setbacks and what did it take for you to sort of start all over again?
So I was in an armed robbery approximately 1 year from, like,
I'm saying today.
Yeah, well, it was November the 13th.
Okay.
And I remember the day so well because it was like a great day. And I was just really excited because I had just came from seeing my son perform in school. And I had just pulled up to my shop and I interviewed someone who's actually now working for me. And after she left, I went and got lunch. And shortly right after, two guys came in and, held me hostage for several, like maybe 30 minutes or so, because they took my bank card. It was a really horrible experience to have it happen. And when I left that space, because I wasn't sure if I was going to leave alive, what was going to happen. And when I left, and she took my product and she loved it. So the day before the robbery, she wore my dress on at like a big Uber meeting. And she tried to message me the day of the robbery to tell me that she wore my dress, but I had no idea, and then this happened. So Lovey ended up telling her that the armed robbery occurred, and so, she tried to reach out, but they took my phone. And she ended up posting on social media about meeting me and the armed robbery, and I received thousands of orders.
You see how that spirit is?
I was just like...
It's amazing.
So
see,
thousands of orders.
When you wanted to meet her, you weren't ready to meet her. See, the reality is this with this thing that we call the universe. I mean, we know it's like water, just moves around. But when you're not ready, you're not ready. In our mind, we think we are. So we can only imagine it happened when it was supposed to happen.
Oh, definitely.
So what message do you have for people who are dealing with setbacks?
So I think
that's a great story.
Yeah,
and what happened? What did you do after that?
I think the best message I could say, even though failure is progress. So though, and what I got out of the robbery is that no matter, because I was down, like so many things happen and it messes with your emotions, depression can come into play. There was a lot, because it's very traumatic. But what I realized is life will happen. Like you can have death in a family, you can have, you can have health issues, a stroke. Those are things that you can't control. The robbery I couldn't control. It wasn't something that I asked for. It wasn't something that I went towards. So I just learned that, and it made me just really feel like failure is progress. No matter what happens, it's how you bounce back, and you made a step forward. And so I was able to successfully bounce back. And and I think that
were there some steps that you sort of took from bouncing back?
Oh yeah, steps that I even continue to fail at.
What are some of those?
So what happened right after, and this was probably one of the first times that I'm talking about this publicly. So right after the robbery, I ended up going to a fulfillment center to try to get my products fulfilled because it was thousands of orders. Didn't know and it was at the holiday. So it was the peak of the holiday. So some people knew about the robbery, some people didn't. So, and I, in go mode, and my operations manager, Jerome Hill, at the time, was trying to hold it all together. And literally, we went to I had a production facility in New Jersey who said that they could fill my orders, but it was just a mess. Customers got things that were messed up. They filled and said that they sent things out and didn't. It was a mess. So this happened in around, I think, the end of November. I drove my whole shop up to Jersey to try to fix things, and it fell apart. And in January, I drove it all back to Baltimore, and I put it back in my house. And I said, I started in my house, I could finish in my house. And that's it. I'm not going to let someone else tarnish my brand by messing up my stuff. So I went back to basics. I hung things in my house and I worked out of my house. Jerome, his mom, my friend, people came over and we did it in my house for about 2 to 3 months. And then we ended up going to a fulfillment center or a space in Baltimore. And eventually it just needed to be back in my own hands. And in March of this year, we reopened a Mess in a Bottle studio. So
what has failure taught you, period?
That it's progress, that no matter how much things have happened and you might fall, it's about how you get back up. And it's still one step forward, and it's not too back.
Well, since you're name dropping with all these other folks, I might as well throw out a guy who I have a lot of respect for, who they trying to get to run for president. I love the show. It's called Shark Tank. You got a chance to meet Mark Cuban.
I did.
And so what was that like, and what advice did Mr. Cuban give to you? Did you call him Mark or Mr. Cuban? What did you call him?
I called him Mark Cuban. Okay. Yeah, because we're familiar. I'm familiar with him.
Yeah. So what advice did he give you?
So I met Mark Cuban my first year of the business. So 1 year after I left Under Armour in 2017, February of 2017, I went on to a show called The Harry Show. It's the Harry Connick Jr. show. And it was just basically pitching your thought, your product to Mark Cuban. And I pitched Mess in a Bottle, and at the time I had glass bottles. They were from IKEA, and I was hand branding them, by hand putting vinyl onto the bottles. And I told Mark that I wanted to go into beverages, and that would be my next step. So Mark Cuban said, because it was just you had to ask him a question about the business kind of thing. So I said I wanted to go into beverages, and what he said was... So
starting a beverage company?
No, making Mess in a Bottle and then evolve it to beverages.
Got you, okay.
So what he said was it's too soon. Figure out making the brand, let everybody in the world know who Mess in a Bottle is, and then do beverages. And that's what I did. That's what I'm doing. So we've already trademarked beverages, and it'll be my next step in a couple of years.
You are just rolling. So what are some challenges from being a female entrepreneur? Any particular challenges that female entrepreneurs and
The
any
biggest challenge.
That's the biggest one.
The biggest challenge, and also being a black woman entrepreneur.
So you got two things. You're a woman, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, you're a woman, you're African American, you're Jamaican, you're from New York.
Yep, I got a lot of strikes against me. You know, the biggest thing, they don't believe that I created this. You know, and it's quite insulting. I mean, most of the times I don't care, and I'm just like, well, it's me. But a lot of, and you know, I guess I'm a younger woman, so a lot of people, they kind of are like, wait, is this your business and you created this?
And I'm sure that's the faces that
and then
you guys can see her faces that she's making. I'm sure they make those faces.
And then they say, like, when they see the vending machine, they're like, and you thought of this? Wow. And I'm like,
you know,
yes.
That's microaggressive behavior, right?
Yeah.
The faces and the condescending language.
Yeah, and I get it from a lot of people, you know, and it's quite interesting.
Do you get it from more men?
No, you know what? It's mutual. I get it from men. I get it from women. I get it from white people. I get it from black people.
But how does it feel from women? I mean, you're on the same team.
Yeah,
and for women to make, what do you think that's coming from?
I think it's just coming from the fact that we see a lot of men in power. We see a lot of men, you know, being able to accomplish these things. Like even now, like when it comes to funding and, you know, funding a startup and startup capital, a lot of black people are not in that space.
When you look at the tech space, white men who don't even have the degrees that we have.
Yeah, and then a lot of, you know, so it's not an equal playing field. So of course we don't see that often. So, you know, it's still questioned and they're like, wow, this is genius. And they're like, you did this? And you know, and so that's why I created I have a shirt that says a black woman created this, because I think that we're creators and everyone should know.
You guys are, I mean, you birthed in a nation. I mean, come on now. So speaking of messages, you just mentioned a message. What's one of your favorite messages on the shirts or any design that you actually have?
So one of my favorite shirts is entrepreneur, and it says entrepreneur, a fancy word for a crazy person following their dream.
I agree, because I know the struggle is real.
Yeah, and I think that's one that across the board, it speaks to everyone who is striving for entrepreneurship.
Okay, so speaking of entrepreneurship, what are 3 tools that you would recommend to anyone starting their own business? 3 tools that you might use. It could be social media, it could be whatever. What are 3? Give me 3 that you can think of.
3 tools
that you may use.
Okay. One, definitely social media. I think social media will tell you if your idea is good or if it's terrible, and you should listen. And not even terrible, let me take that back. I think social media will tell you if you should go in a different direction. Because sometimes when we create a business, it might pull you in a direction you don't know is where it should go. And sometimes social media people can see that before you do. So, you know, kind of listen and take a look at what they're pulling you towards and listen to that, because it might be true and it might be what is really, you know, the direction in which you should go.
So is there one particular social media app that you focus on?
I mean, right now, like, so I tell people all the time to do so if your audience is on Instagram, do that. If you know, choose which one. So I pour my heart out on Facebook because that's more, it's still a professional network, but I have friends and family and everybody's on my Facebook. So I talk more on Facebook. But Instagram, I'm graphically giving them my feelings.
All right, so you got Instagram, Facebook. Anything else? We want to try to get to 3.
Okay, so wait, so social media is one.
Social media.
Yep. My second would be, and you said,
so a tool.
Okay.
A tool.
I would say, what's another tool that I use and that I love? Oh, you know what? I was gonna say blogging.
So blogging.
Yep. Because I think bloggers are really important. Like they know the end. They know what's going on. They know what's new. So just creating a network, and especially with bloggers, I think are great.
So social media blog. Any particular, maybe any podcast that's geared towards maybe I
really love Side Hustle Pro podcast. it's a really good podcast only because I think that it gives budding entrepreneurs that real, like, you know, what you should expect. So she interviews a lot of like newer entrepreneurs or even some seasoned entrepreneurs. So I think it's a great like level of different entrepreneurs. So I really love Side Hustle Pro podcast.
So this is my favorite part of the show. This part of the show is called the Super Bomb Question.
Uh-oh.
So I'm going to throw out a question to you. Hopefully most of them are one word. I don't want you to give it a whole bunch of thought, but I want you just to respond as quickly as possible. You ready?
Okay.
All right, so what's your favorite food?
Ackee and saltfish.
It's funny, I just had the same conversation with the brother that came over my house to change my tire. What sound or noise do you love? What is your superpower?
Art.
What is your animal spirit?
That's a hard one.
I wish you guys could see her. You have a beautiful smile.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
My animal spirit is my feminism.
Your feminism, okay.
Yes.
What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading Charlemagne's new book that just came out. I just turned the
New
first
York
page.
Homeboy. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you listening to?
I'm listening to Jay all day because I'm from New York, and I'm training for the New York Marathon.
Go ahead.
So,
I'm a marathon runner.
yes.
Go ahead.
So I'm Jay-Zing it up right now.
Oh, I know. You gotta have some good music. Let me tell you, when I ran the marathon, I had like all this inspirational music. Then when I was getting to the end, I'm like, I need some real disrespectful music. I need some stuff.
So
that's
I'm ending it with like some Tekashi 6ix9ine. I need some.
You gotta get hard trap music, stuff that you ain't even, stuff that you know your grandma be mad that you listening to. All right, real hard. So here's another one. If you had a gigantic billboard, this should be easy for you. If you had a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or billions, what would it say and why? It could be a few words or a paragraph. If helpful, it could be someone's quote. All right. What would that message say on the billboard? So you driving through Jamaica, man, or you're going through, you coming through the tunnel, crossing the bridge in New York. What would be on that billboard?
I think on the billboard it would say something like, "What's your message? Tell us what your message in a bottle would be, and write it on a T-shirt."